Good day, it is Althea from the Bible in 1 year. Today we spend time in 1 Samuel 23 to 28, the green olive tree. David had to flee from Saul again and again. When David had to make any decisions, he went to God in prayer, asking if he should do what he is contemplating in his heart, testing to see if the plan in his heart is a good plan or not. To have a plan is easy. To know whether the plan will have the right outcome is another thing. At this stage, David didn't even have weapons, as he fled from Saul with nothing. His so-called army consists of men that suffered hardship, who was in debt, and who was discontented, as we read in 1 Samuel 22, verse 2. Not exactly a well-armed, well-trained, brave, successful, conquering army. He does not allow the true circumstances currently manifesting in his life to stop him from inquiring and following God's instructions. Only when God approves, he acts on that. Later in the same chapter, David fought. Will the people of Keilah hand me over to Saul? David took this fort to God in prayer. God said, yes, they will. So David and his men fled. In chapter 24, Saul entered a cave, not knowing that David and his men was hiding in the same cave. David's men said, here is your chance, David, kill him. But David knew that Saul was appointed and anointed by God. And David said in verse 15, may the Lord be the judge and render judgment between you and me. And may he see and plead my case and vindicate me by saving me from your hand. In chapter 26, there is another event that David comes close enough to kill Saul. He does not, because the Lord forbid that he kills the anointed of the Lord. David did not trust Saul and knew that soon enough Saul will pursue him again. David decides to flee across the border and to live there for a while. In this time, David did not confirm his fought with God to see if it is according to God's will in chapter 27. During this time, David raided the country and to sustain himself and his men. He killed all so that no one could tell the truth to the king. He lied to the king. When David inquired the Lord helped and sustained him. When David did not inquire the Lord, he had to fight to stay alive. David did not deal with the roots of sin, and much later we will see that it comes back with much greater strength with Bathsheba. David lived a life devoted to God, but sometimes his flesh got the better of him. Later in his life, he would pay the penalty of this sin. Saul got hooked on Samuel as his go-to for wisdom instead of God himself. After Samuel died, Saul got the witch of Endor to call up Samuel. David prevailed in prayer. He pushes through until he got the answer. Proverbs 3 verse 5. Trust in and rely confidently on the Lord with all of your heart, and do not rely on your own insight or understanding. Proverbs 3 verse 6. In all your ways knows and acknowledge and recognize him, and he will make your path straight and smooth, removing obstacles that block your way. During this time that David fled from Saul, he wrote many songs and poetry, many of them recorded in Psalms. Let's look at one of them, Psalm 52. David starts to write about Saul, who he is in what he does. But then David writes, but God will break you down forever. The righteous will see it and fear. Look, this is a man who would not make God his strength, his stronghold and fortress, as we read in verse 5 to 7. Then David prays over himself in verse 8, but as for me, I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust confidently in the loving kindness of God forever and ever. Let me quote BibleCenter.org. The righteous is assured of stability and blessing, comparable to the vitality of a green olive tree, which is planted in the house of God. This represents one who is vigorous and zealous and righteousness, dwelling close to God in fruitful companionship and unity. Virtue and righteousness is linked to fragrant oil. Olive tree is a symbol of friendship, reconciliation, cleansing and healing, light, victory and riches, and above all a sign of peace. A tree is marked by strength and permanence. It also offers protection and bear fruit. Planted in the house of God stays fresh, flourishing, because it is connected with the spring of life. Jeremiah 2 verse 13 reads, "For my people have committed evil, they have abandoned and rejected me, the fountain of living water." David looked at himself as rooted in the spring of life, and he proclaims that he is a green olive tree, alive and well, growing and bearing fruit.